I don't want people to suffer. And I see people in Gaza today. I recognize human suffering when I see it. It is sad to see the state of human existence in Gaza. It's not something that brings me or other Israelis joy. I would want for my neighbors, my Arab neighbors in Gaza, to focus their creative energies on building their own future.
Welcome to Global Power Shifts. I'm Suzanne Kianpour, joined as always by my co-host Jim Stenman. Today, thanks to everyone joining us live on LinkedIn as well. Today's special guest is Jonathan Conricus, the former IDF spokesperson who became one of Israel's best-known public voices during years of conflict. He's spent a long time explaining Israel's military and security thinking to the world, which makes him the right person to ask not only what Israel thinks it has achieved, but what it may now be losing politically. Today, we want to talk about the battle for global opinion, the Gulf relationship that has been quietly transformed by this war, the future of U.S. support, the war in Iran, Netanyahu, and whether Israel can realistically return to peacetime politics. Our questions really are: has Israel won key battles, gained an unprecedented Gulf security partner, and at the same time maybe lost a generation abroad, especially from our view here in the U.S. and the political center it would need for peace? So, Jonathan, I'd like if you could start by kind of laying out what the sort of Israeli case is clearly. I think most people watching this will have been following the past couple of years, particularly since October 7th. You know, you spent years explaining Israel's security logic to international audience. If you strip away slogans and outrage, what do you think most outsiders still fail to understand about how Israelis see October 7th and then everything that followed?
Yeah, that's a big one. And I think it's a very good place to start. So from an Israeli perspective, and I'll try to be as short and succinct as possible, the way Israelis feel, by and large, I would say that, we are fighting on a lot of fronts simultaneously. Sadly, consecutive Israeli governments have allowed a situation where there's various Iranian proxies that were nested and were able to build significant capabilities along our borders. The biggest and most dangerous one was Hezbollah in Lebanon, which, by the way, today, it's fascinating to see that the Lebanese government, for the first time in history, is saying what we've been saying all along. Hezbollah is a foreign entity that is holding the Lebanese state hostage and using Lebanon not to Lebanese interests in order to serve a foreign purpose, and that is the purposes of the Islamic Republic of Iran, and they're using Lebanon as a launchpad against Israel. And I would say that today the security situation in Israel is far better than it was on October 7. All of our enemies, Hezbollah, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, the proxies in Syria who no longer exist, and most importantly, the Islamic regime, all of them are weaker. All of them are on the back foot. All of them are receding.
But they can't be defeated without the sort of, I've realized that the actual population in the region, also having lived in Dubai and being an American journalist in Dubai, it was like a completely eye-opening experience of just how much propaganda there is and how much anti-Israel sentiment there is. And whenever I had these conversations with, even people that I was socializing with, they were saying everything was about defending Palestine. Now that's on the kind of personal and just general population front. On the political front, when I would interview Iranian regime officials, I was in Israel doing a documentary for the BBC on the Iran-Israel shadow war. It was like an hour-long opus, kind of digging through, going all the way back to its inception. And when I asked Iranian officials, I said, what is your beef with Israel? Like, are you anti-Semitic? What is the deal? And they said that they see themselves as the defenders of Palestine and they need to free Palestinians. And so my question has always been, well, okay, if Palestine is their excuse, then Hamas and Palestine is also Hamas's excuse, so defending the Palestinians. Then isn't the obvious answer there being a Palestinian state? Then nobody can say, oh, Israel shouldn't exist because they're occupying the Palestinians.
Yeah, this goes deeper, and I think when we look at the situation historically speaking and we trace back the origins of the conflict between Jews and Arabs in the land of Israel, what some people, a lot of people call Palestine, what I, in terms of my terminology, will refer to as the land of Israel, the biblical land of Israel. When we trace the history back, the sad situation, I think, today, looking back, is that the people who are referred to as Palestinians are used, and they're no more than a tool in the hands of various enemies of the Jews. In the early stages, it was Arab countries like Egypt, like Syria, and to a great extent also the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan, who said, well, we don't like the Jews being here. We don't want the Jews to have a state. We're going to fight it by any way we can. Since then, we've made peace with the Jordanians and the Egyptians, not because they've come to love and appreciate the biblical connection of the Jewish people to their ancestral homeland, the land of Israel. They've come to understand and accept the fact that the Jews are here and that the Jews are going to continue to live here, whether they like it or not. So from a Machiavellian realpolitik point of view, might as well make peace with the Jews, because why be at war if we can't defeat them? If they would have been able to defeat us, I'm sure they would have opted for that, but they failed 3 times. And the last time that they actually understood it was in 73 after Yom Kippur, when they all teamed up against Israel, tried to defeat us, didn't defeat us, and then they understood, okay, we need to make peace because we can't defeat them militarily. 4 different Israeli prime ministers have approached the 2 Palestinian leaders, first Yasser Arafat twice, and then Mahmoud Abbas twice, and said, here's a deal. Here's 98% of the disputed territory. Here's an option for you to have a capital in eastern Jerusalem. Here's land swaps, and here's an end to the conflict between us. It'll give you self-definition. It'll give us recognized borders, and let's just end the conflict and move on with our lives. Let's focus on creative things. Let's focus on prosperity. Let's build our security, and let's respect each other's right to exist here. All 4 proposals have been rejected by the so-called Palestinians, all of them. So when people come and blame Israel for the situation, I think that's ignorant in best case, and I think it's dishonest and cynical in a more realistic scenario. And I regret that, because I don't want people to suffer. And I see people in Gaza today. I recognize human suffering when I see it. It is sad to see the state of human existence in Gaza. It's not something that brings me or other Israelis joy. I would want for my neighbors, my Arab neighbors in Gaza, to focus their creative energies on building their own future. I would want them to focus on being creative, on building work and infrastructure and culture and music and arts and industry and all of the things that are beautiful in life. And I know that they have the creative potential to do so. I see where they channel their creative capabilities. They channel them underground. They build tunnels, and they build rockets and weapons and all this infrastructure, which was a lot of hard work and a lot of creativity. And I could only wish that they would, instead of focusing on jihad and trying to kill us, they would focus on their own future. And the way forward is mutual recognition, respect, tolerance, but understanding that for us, for Israelis to be able to extend a hand of peace to any of our neighbors, we're willing to do so, but the precondition is recognize the fact that we are here and recognize that we are going to continue to be here. Unless you do that, it's not going to work.
Jonathan, I've lived in the Gulf for the past 10 years, and the amount of anti-Israeli sentiment, not just anti-Israeli, but there's no separation between the Israeli government, the Israeli people, and even Jewish people globally that I've witnessed from certainly from Arabs from other countries living in the Gulf, and other Muslims that live there as well. And some of it has been quite shocking, actually, in terms of the language that's being used. You kind of highlighted how Israel has won a lot of battles post October 7th. That's certainly true. But is there a fear that at the same time the country has lost a significant amount of support, and maybe even a generation abroad? I'm specifically, referring to protests on campuses in the US, protests in London as well. And is there a fear that the existing relationship that you have with the US might look very different 5 or 10 years down the line in terms of that support that's being extended to Israel?
Definitely so. And I think when you speak about the Gulf, the Gulf is actually an area that I'm less worried with, because I think Iranian actions, Iranian aggression against the Gulf states, and Israeli response to that aggression, and how Israel helped defend the UAE and many other countries directly and indirectly. I think that's going to be positive and meaningful moving forward. So even though I totally agree with what you said, and I've heard and experienced similar things, that is of less concern. And I think there's actually positive developments in the future in the Gulf area with Sunni Muslims that I think Israel can build on. I am, however, very concerned about Israel's standing and reputation in the West, among Western democracies, in the US, amongst the mostly Democratic voters. I think Israel has found itself, has been casted as, an unwilling participant in kind of a global battle of narratives that is part of left, right, that is part of many other bigger topics in Western society, so-called progressives versus conservatives, and Israel is cast into that mix of topics many times to the detriment of Israel. I am concerned about it, and I think I'm also very much concerned about the future of Europe. I'm concerned about where that continent is going. I'm concerned about Muslim or Islamic control over those countries. I'm concerned about the expansion of the Muslim Brotherhood and radical Islam in Christian European countries. I see the institutions being hollowed out. I see weak, feckless European leadership that is cowering in front of electoral pressure, Muslim electoral pressure in their countries. I see European countries becoming less and less European, less and less relevant to what's going on in the world. They were once, they defined borders, they were colonial powers, they were industrial powerhouses and houses of cultural creativity and industrial creativity. You don't see that. You see a continent in decline. And usually, historically speaking, that also corresponds pretty well with anti-Semitism. Even though there's no logical connection, start hating the Jews and singling out the Jews, and therefore you're doing bad in other aspects. But many times in history, when we look back at societies that started to decay, lose their creativity, lose their spiritual qualities, you find that a lot of those things, they work together very well with anti-Semitism. So yes, I'm concerned. Yes, I think Israel should be communicating better. Yes, I think Israel should invest more in diplomacy. Yes, I think we should be stating our case better, mostly to young Americans, young Europeans. And yes, we should be explaining what we're doing and why European leaders, American leaders, Canadian, New Zealand, and all other countries that today are pontificating against Israel and blaming Israel for atrocities and many other lies that are libel and untrue. I would tell them, look inwards, look into your societies, look into the hatred and the bigotry and the anti-Semitism that you are allowing on your streets. Look how Islamist organizations are slowly but surely taking over your institutions, and ask yourself, is this the future that you want? The Jewish problem is just a small part of it, and it's much bigger things that are at stake here.
I've spoken to Jewish friends both in London and New York, and I think it would be fair to say that they support most of the policies of Israel, but they are really concerned that they're paying the price in terms of fear for their own safety. And we're going to be doing a separate podcast on this in the next few weeks as well. I mean, how concerning is that in particular, this perception that some people have that they're paying the price for, the policies of Israel, and that the fact that this is spilling over into the streets of Europe and the US to some extent. Yes, you can blame other governments, but at the end of the day, this is still your community, right? And you were a member of the diaspora before you moved to Israel. That must be really concerning, living in these big cities and fearing for your safety.
But also, just to add to that, I would also be curious, what role is the sort of politics inside Israel and the shift towards more extreme policies? Because we are seeing a shift, and, we are seeing more and more kind of problematic rhetoric around settlers, for example, and their rhetoric around Palestinians. And that plays into the security concerns of Jews abroad.
Yeah, those are important points. And I very much agree with what you said, Suzanne, about Israeli rhetoric. And there are quite a few distasteful statements that have been made by Israeli politicians, some of them very important ones that I personally distance myself from. And I think that there's room for Israeli elected officials to be much wiser in how they choose their words and what they say and the policies that I can say that I think on that note, I think there's also public pushback in Israel against extremist statements, etc. And there are elections coming up in a few months in Israel. They will be very fiercely contested and very heated. And I think, and I hope that we will have a type of Israeli leadership that continues to be strong, unapologetic, fierce in defending the state of Israel and its sovereignty and a no nonsense attitude towards all of our enemies, but also that embraces moderation and that constantly keeps looking for peaceful and diplomatic solutions to conflict. And I'm definitely not, a favor of extremism of any kind. I wouldn't make, any equivalence between Israeli extremism and the extremism of our enemies, but I understand when especially as amplified by a very biased anti-Israeli Western media, things can look bad and they can be taken a lot out of context. But unfortunately, there are undisciplined and reckless Israeli politicians who make it easy for biased activists that are masquerading as journalists around the world to paint a very bad picture of Israel. Now, coming back to what you asked, Jim, my message for those Jews is man up. Man up and get comfortable with being uncomfortable. That is your lot in life. If you think that being a Jew is that you'll be loved by people and that everything that people will accept you, you haven't studied history, and that's not this incarnation for you. But if someone who is a Jew in London or New York is feeling sad and betrothed by the fact that people don't like them when people can be nasty towards them, okay, man up. Be strong, be proud, fight back. Good things will come.
I'll hand over to Suzanne, but I just want to make a very quick point that my friends that I've spoken to, they have a fear for their physical safety, which was quite shocking for me to hear, but I understand the context that it sits within. Suzanne?
Yeah, do Krav Maga. Do Krav Maga, man up, and don't invite attacks. Don't be weak. That's how you deal with attackers. That's how you deal with bullies. That's how you deal with cowards. And most anti-Semites, whether they're Islamists or they're Tucker Carlsons or they're Mehdi Hassans or whatever shape and form they have, they're cowards. They enjoy the strength of the masses and the protection of the masses. But when they face strong resistance and proud resistance that is measured, professional, but based on a very solid foundation, they back away.
I've been thinking a lot about World War II. We here in Washington have the King Charles is visiting the UK, the British King, and there's been talk that the special relationship is no longer US-UK, but actually US-Israel, and there's been coverage calling Netanyahu the Churchill of our time. And also, I've been thinking about the fact that, war is not something, I don't remember who said this, but somebody said this. War is not meant to be played out for the public. The public is not supposed to see how war is played out. And you were the spokesperson for Israel for the IDF in the aftermath of October 7th and the beginning of the operations in Gaza. And for the first time, really, I think it really started to begin in Ukraine, where the Ukraine was like the Instagram war. But then once October 7th happened and the war with Hamas started in Gaza, we were just watching all of this unfold. And I was in Dubai at the time and speaking to a young man in Gaza who was telling me that he hates Hamas. He hates Hamas. He loves America. He wants to be able to freely travel. But he also hates Israel because they're bombing them. And now kind of fast forward to now, where Israel has been bombing Iran, where my family is. And, my family in Iran is desperate to be free of this tyrannical regime, as are about 80% of the country. And yet, of course, the few messages we've been able to get from them, they've been absolutely horrified and terrified that they're being bombed, of course. And so I guess, I think I want to get back to the humanity of this all. People I read this article in France from a woman in France during World War II, where she was angry at the Allies for bombing them. But obviously the Allies are who freed them from the Nazis. And I guess kind of bringing it back to the winning the battles but losing the war. How can you really win the public back when the public sees what's happened in Gaza as a genocide? Like, a lot of the public, obviously not all of the public, but a lot of the public. And you yourself, you said that it hurt you to see suffering. And so, we never hear that from somebody like you. And so I would like you to kind of really tell us as a human what it's like kind of having to speak up and effectively defend killing civilians. I mean, what is that like for you? I mean, you have a family. What is that like for you?
So I hope your family is safe, and I wish that they one day, very soon, will be free of the tyranny of a corrupt and oppressive Islamist regime, which is foreign to your country, foreign to your culture, foreign to your heritage, and has done very bad things to your people. And I hope that, just like any other oppressed people, the so-called Palestinians in Gaza and many others who live under tyrannical rule, I hope that they'll be free. And I'll first answer, part of, the hearts and minds and battles and war. The first thing is winning. And after you win, things become much more clear. There shouldn't be any meaningful differences of opinion when it comes to Israel and the Islamic Republic of Iran. The Islamic Republic of Iran is evil. Hamas is evil. Hezbollah is evil. These are evil organizations that are oppressive, horrible, violent, intolerant, and have a mindset that doesn't promote anything good. They're about jihad against infidels and against inferior people from their perspective, and they're about forcing their worldview on others and about killing civilians, women, children, babies, and men in order to get that done. So when you ask me about how do I feel representing the military of the state of Israel as civilians are also being killed on the battlefield, it's sad when civilians are killed. And it's sad to see civilians affected by war everywhere. It was sad for me to see that happen in Afghanistan, in Mosul, in Fallujah. It's sad to see it happen in N'Djamena, in Niger. It's sad to see it happen in Nigeria and in Somalia. And it's sad to see it happen in Ukraine and in all of the other war theaters around the world. It's what saddens me also, not more than that, because the saddest thing is when people die and suffer who are not part of the war. But what's also very saddening is the hypocrisy of it all. It is how hypocritical people are and how corrupted the minds are when people who otherwise are intelligent and enlightened people and, are research and usually form their opinions on research and fact, they're able to say and believe with a straight face the horrible thing that you said, that Israel is conducting genocide. That, in my mind, is preposterous. It is ridiculous. It is such a grotesque misrepresentation of what's been going on in Gaza. The only party to the conflict that has any genocidal intent is Hamas. They went into Israel with the purpose of actually killing every Israeli that they can get their hands on. Women, children, elderly, babies, and the 95-year-old Holocaust survivors and anything in between. That's what they did until we killed them all and until we were able to stop them. Israel was forced into an almost impossible situation whereby Hamas hides underneath the civilians in Gaza and uses them as their human shields and makes it almost impossible for us to fight them, the enemy, without putting civilians in harm's way. And according to the laws of armed conflict, when someone uses human shields as in fighting, that's a war crime. That is against international humanitarian law, and Israel has the right to defend itself.
Much of what you just described is what the Iranian regime is doing and what Hezbollah is doing. my sources inside Lebanon, where I used to live, and also inside Iran, say that they kind of never know who lives where and who lives close to them, and therefore who is a target. And so, that's obviously terrifying as a civilian. And I guess my question is, how does this end? I mean, particularly with Iran, it doesn't look like it's going to end militarily from the sky. Obviously, Mossad on the ground has done a lot to debilitate the regime, but it looks like without, opposition teams potentially armed on the ground, that might not happen, as in the regime might not be able to be taken out. And then, there's question of who comes in after. So I guess, I know we don't have a whole lot of time. I know that's a long question and it's loaded and I wish we had so much more time. But yeah, I mean, how does this end?
I'll give you my optimistic assessment. I'm not optimistic about Gaza. I think Hamas is going to continue to be a problem there. They're not going to be disarmed. And that means that the future there is jihad. And if the future is jihad, it's violence, it's suffering, it's civilians getting killed, it's oppression, and it's misery. That's usually comes hand in hand with jihad. In Iran, I think it's a different situation. And I have great faith in the Iranian people. I have faith that they will be able to rise up. I have faith that they will be able to get the means that they need in order to do so in a meaningful and effective way. And I think that the days of
But does that
this,
mean weapons?
yeah, it means weapons, also
But how?
weapons. I think we will hopefully see that in the not so distant future.
But what does that mean in terms of months? And the reason why I'm pushing you on this is because I get messages from Iran when I can. They're spending a fortune on VPNs that's a big risk to them because the regime is infiltrating these platforms as well now.
Yeah.
So, if I have really one job here, it's to get them real information and real hope and real messages and for them to make decisions on what they're going to do. So,
yeah, I mean, what I hope and I believe will happen is that this corrupt Iranian regime will have done so much wrong and so many poor decisions and so many mistakes that eventually it'll be weakened enough externally, but most importantly internally, for the Iranian people to rise up and reclaim their country. I don't think it's going to be easy. I don't think it's going to be pretty. I think, like most other revolutions against oppressive totalitarian regimes, it will have to include violence. But at the end of the day, this Iranian regime is the regime weakest that it has ever been in 47 years. It is in unprecedented economic and military trouble. It suffers from tremendous lack of popularity and distrust and hatred amongst Iranians, patriotic Iranians who are not stooges of Israel, and they're just ordinary people who want to live a good and prosperous life for them and their families, and people are fed up with the regime. And I think that eventually that will be brought to bear, maybe with some external help to even out the playing field with weapons and communications and a few other things. But I think that is how the situation will end for the regime. It'll be a beginning for the Iranian people. It'll be a new beginning for the Middle East. It'll be a beginning for Lebanon, a beginning for Gaza, a beginning for Iran, a beginning for Yemen, a beginning for Syria, for many other countries that have suffered this Islamic regime expansionism and imperialism in the region. And I think many beautiful and positive things will happen. And I can only look forward to a future of prosperity, of coexistence, of respect, of peace between the people of Iran and the people of Israel. And I think that'll be great for the Middle East. And I really hope that it will happen. And I believe that it will happen. And I'm not some rosy-eyed idealist. I'm, a hardcore military person that looks and makes assessments. But I think there's hope for it. And I think the regime is so weak that it's there, it is exposed. And what it needs to happen is strong internal resistance of Iranian people, and it will fall, and good things will ensue for the Iranian people.
Inshallah, as they say.
Inshallah.
Yeah. Jonathan Conricus, it's been really good having you on and learning more about your perspective. We want to encourage all of our viewers and listeners to follow Global Power Shifts. That's Global Power Shifts on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We're even on LinkedIn, so we'll do a wrap of this conversation as well in article format. Thanks for coming on, and hope to chat to you again soon.
Definitely. Look forward to it. Thanks for having me on. This is an interesting experience, and I think you bring a fresh perspective. And I appreciate the opportunity of being on your show, and we'll do so in the future, and you'll hold me accountable for the assessments that I've made.
Thank you.
Thank you.